start by speaking about the new international equilibrium in which emerging countries are playing a prominent role as new global centers of production and consumption, of trade and wealth. I apologize if my English is not as good as it should be, but I sincerely thank you for your comprehension. And so, if you don't mind, let's start. I will give you, I hope, a brief introduction of this, and then later I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have about the topic we are going to talk about. The structure of the presentation is as follows. First, I will talk about the concept of emerging economies and their increasing significance in the global scene. Second, I will mention their development prospects for the next decades. And later, I will refer to some key factors that lie behind their success, and to conclude, I will present a perspective overview of the case of Mexico, particularly some specific measures to accomplish a better future. Let's start with the emerging economies. The term emerging economies is an extension of the concept emerging markets, coined at the end of the 1970s, that refers solely to the capital markets of developing countries. This broad category includes such different nations as you will see at the presentation: Argentina, Algeria, Bangladesh, etc., of course going through Mexico and Thailand. Taking into account this diversity, emerging economies may be defined in broad terms as those countries which have started to grow but have yet not reached a mature stage of development, and or where there still is significant potential for economic or political instability. The importance of the emerging economies. The following facts illustrate their importance. As a group, their annual economic growth has more than doubled that of high-income economies. In 2007, they grew 7.8%, in contrast with the 2.6%. Second, 2/3 of the world economic growth stemmed from emerging countries. Third, their imports are becoming an import engine of the world economic growth. Their demand accounts for 50% of global import growth. They have a direct impact on inflation, interest rates, and wages of developed countries. During the 1990s, the flows of foreign direct investment towards this country increased 23% yearly. In 5 years, the risk levels have declined to less than half, measured by the risk premium of their bonds. According to some studies, China and India are the preferred destinations for foreign direct investment above the United States. In the last decade, emerging countries decreased their share in the institutional investor portfolio from 9.67% to 16%. The foreign direct investment among emerging countries grows 5 times faster than the foreign direct investment from developed countries to emerging countries. Approximately 60 companies of Fortune Global 500 are based in emerging economies. 14 of these multinational companies are specialized in high technology or in capital-intensive industries. The Asian economies represent 26% of the IT global services market. Their poverty levels are being consistently reduced and their consumption is increasing. In 2007, their consumer spending grew 3 times faster than that of the developed world. What are the prospects for the emerging economies? There are all kinds of prospects regarding the future of emerging countries. In general, they agree that during the following years, these economies will continue playing an important role in the global economy. Some specialists even point out that by the decade of 2030 and 2040, they will outrank developed economies. For instance, Goldman Sachs estimates that in 2027 year, the economy of the China will beat in size the economy of the United States, and the economy of India will do the same in 2050. On the other side of the forecasters, Alan Greenspan is more skeptical. He argues that the accelerated rhythm of the development of these countries cannot be sustained for so many years because it is founded on, first, the impact of the transition from the rural economy to another one of competitive urban markets, and second, the adoption in their production processes of existing technologies developed in high-income countries. According to Greenspan, both processes are not infinite and will soon be limited by wage increases in China, with their consequent growth in the price of their exports, as well as a reduction in their savings and investments rates due to the adoption of Western consumption patterns. What holds in both future views is that emerging economies offer an encouraging growth prospects, even nowadays when world economy is facing a slowdown. According to estimations in the International Monetary Fund, the emerging economies will expand 6.3% in 2008 and 6.4% in 2009, compared to the 1.3% expansion of the advanced economies in both years. Now, with regard to projections for the following decades, we can observe the following. By 2020, the size of the world economy will increase threefold compared to the present one. Global GDP will grow to an annual rate of 3.5% during 2008 and 2020. China and India will continue to be the emerging economies with the highest growth rate, in average of 60% per year. 6% per year. China will contribute 26.7% to the global economic growth, whereas the United States will contribute 15.9% and India 12.2%. The global GDP share of the G7 developed countries, that today accounts for 57%, will probably decline to only 21% by the year 2050. In 2020, the United States will continue being the largest consumption market. China will be the second, and India will compete with the European Union for the third place. The GDP of the United States will grow 3% annually, thanks to the increase in productivity and its investment in information and communication technologies, whereas Latin America might fall behind by growing only 3.2% per year during the period of 2008-2020, figure that is below the global and Asian. Figure that it is below the global and Asian averages, and even that of the Middle East and the north of Africa. Unfortunately, Latin America is an example of a region that has not achieved the success levels of other emerging economies. In spite of facing the recurrent crisis, its poor growth seems to be more related to long-term structural factors, such as the level of its human capital, which is lower than that of Asia or Europe. This is something that has to change in the medium term, due to the fact that if our region continues being the eternal supplier of cheap raw materials or labor injector, this will not benefit anyone. Perhaps the low Latin American performance may be a sign that the future of emerging economies is limited by their capacity to reduce poverty and income inequality. successful emerging economies. As it can be observed, even within the emerging economies, there is a disparity with regard to their economic performance. To the same extent, it is convenient to point out the variables that will foster the progress of the Asian region, since their economic annual growth is estimated in almost 5% from now until 2020. These are some examples. Increased saving and investment levels, greater opinions and insertion into globalization, higher productivity and competitiveness, increasing levels of education and work training, considerable investment in science, technology, and innovation, targeted development of information and communication technologies, regulatory and institutional reforms. In consequence, we can conclude that the successful emerging economies are those that have better modified the incentives structure of their markets in order to orient them towards the creation of wealth. Also, remarkable is the significant work of their governments in the following. First, promote competitiveness in their different markets. Second, foster higher market flexibility in order to obtain a more efficient allocation of resources. And third, apply public policies that direct public resources towards activities with the highest social profitability. Education and investment in infrastructure. Those are the two main issues that sincerely have increased the competitiveness of these emerging economies. In the near future, Asia decision makers will also have to incorporate into their list of growth mechanisms policies that address and satisfy the growing inequality in income distribution and environmental deterioration. Among all this scenario, I would like to, thank you, Julio, to give you some lines of what is going on in Mexico. How's Mexico today? According to the International Business Report, Emerging Markets Index, Mexico appears in 4th place after China, India, and Russia. Out of these 4 emerging countries, Mexico's per capita gross domestic product is below Russia, but above China and India. According to this report, Mexico's current position should not be a surprise. Its economy has had an unprecedented stability for the last 8 years, and inflation has been stable and continues to fall. Furthermore, Mexico has 12 free trade agreements with 43 countries, also benefits from well-qualified labor, together with powerful manufacturing and assembly industry, as well as an enviable proximity to the US market. As a result, for instance, foreign direct investment in our country amounted to $37 billion in 2007, almost doubling the sum of what was received in 2006, thus placing our country as the main recipient of foreign direct investment in Latin America. Mexico is the largest exporter of Latin America and the 16th worldwide. Last year, our country exported goods that added up to the $272 billion, 9% more than in 2006, in contrast with the export from Brazil that totaled $159 billion. However, despite these positive arguments, the truth is that Mexico will only contribute with 1.5% of the global economic growth in the period 2008-2020, according to forecasters. From now on, from now on to that year, it is estimated that our gross domestic product will only increase 2.9% per year, below the 3.5% of the global gross domestic product. Even more serious is that Mexico per capita income will only rise 1.8 yearly, whilst the global per capita gross domestic product will grow 2.5. This is unacceptable, especially taking into account that 47% of the Mexican population lives in poverty, unfortunately. How we are enhancing Mexico's future? No nation should remain passive before the changes and transformations of the environment, particularly if global trends are not favorable in the short term. Therefore, from now on, we have to be able to imagine, plan, and make a better future of Mexico. I am convinced that prospective overviews have two important functions. One, to anticipate adverse scenarios and take timely measures to avoid them. And second, to design favorable scenarios and outline public policies to attain them. In the case of Mexico, it is clear that the described scenario is not very encouraging. Consequently, the first step we need to take is to reflect on and define with clarity what kind of country we want. Rather than making up a nation, we must start from what Mexico already is, from the resources it has and from those it can generate, if appropriate actions are taken. The objective is to establish public policies that go beyond the traditional six-year presidential term, thus avoiding the every 6 years at the change of administration. Bureaucracies and cabinets start again from scratch and lose valuable time redefining strategic plans and programs. Mexico requires a true national agreement for its development, an agreement that does not depend on the political affiliation or the composition of the political forces of its Congress, but on the establishment of very clear and accurate objectives shared by everyone. Personally, I consider that the core priority of the country is to become a more fair and equitable nation, where poverty may be reduced drastically upon the productive incorporation of our most important asset, our population. This social transition might be the key behind the success of nations like China, and best of all, it is feasible in our case. In Mexico, we are undergoing a demographic transition which, if tapped adequately, will positively impact in our goals of economic growth and development. The base of the population pyramid is declining every day. This means that a higher number of Mexicans is ready to enter the labor market, thus increasing domestic savings and investment levels. This window of opportunity, also known as demographic bonus, will remain temporarily open in Mexico for the first and only time from 2012 to 2033. Its basic feature will be an abundant offer of labor. The scenarios indicate that a steady annual 4.6 growth rate of the gross domestic product will be required so that the number of formal, productive, and well-remunerated jobs with benefits may absorb almost 85% of the economically active population in 2030. It is important to highlight that the economically active population of the country will rise from 45 million in this year to 47 in 2010 to 60 million in 2030 and up to 61 million in 2050, thus reaching its all-time high 62 1.9 million in 2022. From these figures, that implied the need of creating up to 955,000 jobs per year, arises a second national priority, the recovery of sustained economic growth. Mexico needs a new national strategy of accelerated and shared growth that may tap the upturn of the tertiary sector of the economy and our openness to international trade. I want to be very clear, the economic policies should not make us forget or disrupt a third priority, the strengthening of national unity. At present, we bear witness of the existence of not only a dual economy, that is, of thriving sectors and other ones that have fallen behind. But as a result of such, there is also a fragmented society at both socioeconomic and regional levels between the North and the South. In order to decrease such deficiencies, the role of the government is essential. The state must be the great promoter and regulator of the efficient operation of the markets. In summary, the facilitator of our development processes. Rich and developed zones with high standards of living coexisting with depressed regions in extreme poverty with a worrying marginalization is no longer acceptable, because this scenario generates distrust, ungovernability, and delinquency. The objective is that the development and strengthening of markets may spread all over the national territory by creating opportunities for everyone. In other words, we must be able to build and boost a policy of comprehensive development on the territory, where the investment in infrastructure may be the trigger of a buoyant domestic market that complements our exporting sector. In terms of culture, we must consolidate and define new social values of national identity. The priority is to maintain the recent democratic advances and make progress towards a more fair, participative, transparent, honest, and solidarity nation that contributes to the reinforcement of the rule of law and our sense of belonging. If we are capable of achieving an accelerated progress, this has to be accompanied by a new social balance that promotes both competitiveness and respectful coexistence. The key is to advocate for minimum consensus, regardless of our political or ideological preferences. National unity will enable us to positively assume and harness globalization and be a major player in the ongoing trends. Globalization offers to us challenges and opportunities derived from the integration of financial and capital flows, the increase in trade, and the transference of technology. We must take advantage of globalization to narrow the gaps between levels of income, productivity, competitiveness among the NAFTA member countries. Similarly, Mexico must work closely with the United States to reach an agreement to regulate labor migration and channel it legally. The best scheme is that of the temporary labor migration, just as the one we have started to apply with Canada in certain sectors. Mexicans already in the United States should also have a chance to legalize their status. As we've said, Mexico must develop its economy in order to increase job opportunities for Mexicans in our side of the border. Mexico can also take advantage of being part of the G5 and the expand dialogue with the G8 to promote its own development agenda and play a more active role in the world. Among Mexico's global strategies should be to enter into alliances with other emerging economies, just as China and India have done with the sub-Saharan Africa. Likewise, Mexico has to take on a commitment with environmental preservation, so that its development is not limited by the shortage of vital natural resources like water, which in a world of increased scarcity may constitute a competitive advantage over the other nations. Let me have our final remarks of what I just have said and be open to answer any question you may have. In order to address each and every one of the national priorities that I have outlined, Mexico requires an adequate institutional framework and, above all, competent human capital. In like manner, the possibility of achieving the mentioned goals will depend on the place education is given as a crucial factor in true development. In other words, we must define education as the center of the national relaunching projects. We have to assume that the technological revolution will continue to transform our daily lives in a more radical manner than the whole of the technological innovation of the past. Nowadays, technology does not only mean machines and high-tech gadgets, but innovative processes and ideas. It means added value, national wealth, and improved living standards. Therefore, our educational revolution must meet two specific objectives. First, provide the population with knowledge tools to innovate ideas, services, and products. And second, increase the adaptation ability of the population towards change. Because if there is something certain in the future, is that the change will accelerate and reach every aspect of our lives. We are aware that globalization will continue creating unprecedented opportunities and challenges. The best way of approaching them is through our domestic strength. No one else will do for us what we have to do no one else will do for us what we have to do in order to strengthen and modernize Mexico. Hence the importance of this prospective overview to timely anticipate changes that will force us to modify our traditional way of doing things, to design, as from now on, strategic public policies that exceed short-term views and everyday decisions. And I'm sure that this prospective overview, the contribution and remarks of the members of the World Future Society will be very enriching. This is very, I know, brief, but at least brief introduction of our point of view, what is happening with the emerging economies all over the world, and what is the special situation of Mexico, what are the conditions we have, and the challenges we have for our country. And something I would like to remark is the great challenge we have in Mexico, and I think in the whole Latin America, in order to contrast poverty and to make more equilibrated, how would you say, sociedad igualitaria? More equality in society. You understood it well.
VoiceOver. La batería se está agotando. Cerrar. Botón. Detener grabación.